Tucker Carlson just slammed Matt Walsh's fence sitting on the issue of Israel's genocide in Gaza, calling it an embrace of collective punishment. And in this clip, they get into something of a fiery exchange on this topic, with Matt Walsh classically saying he doesn't care, but Tucker making him face the reality of the situation, that not caring is actually taking a side in this whole thing. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
As I heard you explain who you're fighting against and why, and I nodded along in agreement, I really was the choir to your sermon. I thought you're describing the people who defend the war in Gaza perfectly. They don't believe in absolute standards of truth at all. What they're committing in Gaza is exactly what they decry correctly when it happens to other people. You can't kill innocents. They didn't do anything wrong. Not on purpose, you can't. Period. You're not allowed to do that, but they defend it fully. So they don't believe in an absolute standard of behavior at all. They don't believe in truth. It's dependent upon circumstance. Like, in fact, you've even seen people say it out loud. You know, we raised an entire generation correctly to believe that slaughtering people because of how they were born is the greatest sin, which it is. I believe that. And now we're being, hoisted by our own standards. And my view is, no, standards are absolute. It's either true or it's not. And it's universally applicable, or it's not a real thing. It's just it's identity politics. It's exactly what I hate. And identity politics is the kind of political expression of the worldview that you have just decried and declared war against. And God bless you for doing that. But that is in full flower on the right. And I don't want to dignify people by naming them, but people I know who call themselves like MAGA conservatives are defending the murder of innocents. And by the way, some of them suggest, well, we just move the refugees into the United States because that's good for the country that they support. But is that good for us? That's an attack on American identity.
Yeah, Tucker's exactly right here. A lot of people do defend it, even while saying, hey, no one defends this killing in Gaza. No one defends the killing of innocents, but they make every excuse in the book, not only for it, but also to continue bankrolling Israel after the fact, after this has been exposed, after 100,000 civilians have been killed there. That is what we are getting here. And they'll make every excuse in the book. Like I said, they'll say, hey, this is all Hamas is doing, or they use human shields, as if that's a justification, when the human shield justification doesn't get you out of a premeditated murder charge in the United States. We would never allow that to fly in the United States. If two evildoers take, 10 hostages into a school, you don't just drop a bomb. You couldn't justify that by blaming them. And that's what a large portion of the American Zionist right does. And it needs to be exposed. It needs to be put out in the open that we just can't keep defending this. There's no sense in it. And those people that continue to do this and make excuses need to be raked over the coals for it.
You're also describing, by the way, in a lot of ways, Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, who we're all required to hate. And I'm not supporting him, of course. But this is like the most socially conservative country in Latin America that has banned abortion, banned gay marriage, banned gender transitions, banned usury, banned, loaning at crazy interest levels because it destroys people. I don't think he's done a good job running his country. Obviously, he hasn't. But to your point that, we should be open to talking to people who share our most basic values. How is he not on that list? Oh, shut up, you communist. But I'm not a communist. I'm not going to be bullied by your dumb labels.
Yeah, well, the answer to the Maduro question is that the neocons still want to overthrow that regime, just as they did in Bush's. They kind of go together in some regard, but Trump's first term, where he tried to replace Maduro with Juan Guaido, giving him $53 million. This was widely reported at the time, and denouncing Maduro as, some crook that stole an election, right? He stole an election. We're going to overthrow him, and making up all this absurd propaganda as they are now about narco-terrorism when no fentanyl comes in from Venezuela, minuscule amounts of cocaine do. It's just a neocon empire building project, but in South America rather than the Middle East this time.
Not yours, but I'm anticipating the many attacks. I have been attacked for saying that, but it's true. So what's the answer? Do you see what I'm saying? So I guess what's blowing my mind is that I thought I was speaking the same language as a lot of people that I disagreed with on the margins, like about, what's the best way to harness capitalism to help people. I mean, these are real debates. And then I realized with the war in Gaza that, like, these are people who don't believe in Western civilization, because Western civilization can be boiled down to one concept, and that's the individual. If someone does something wrong, we punish that person. We don't kill his kids. Why do we do that? Why is that our standard? Because we believe that God created every person as an individual, and every person will stand before God alone to account for his life. He's not responsible for what his children do, what his ancestors did, what his forebears might do. He's responsible for himself, because we believe in the individual soul, not the collective soul. And that's what makes our civilization unique in the history of the world. And it derives from Christianity, from the Christian belief of the individual soul. And I see all these people who, like, clearly don't believe that. So how are we on the same side?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, especially because a lot of these people on the right, people like Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and some others, made their careers, just exposing identity politics on the left, on the liberal establishment side, just excoriating some of these people in public debates about carrying on this idea that, there's this white guilt, there's this intrinsic, guilt in our society in America because of what our ancestors did. Well, that's the kind of collective judgment that many of the neocons and Zionists use about Palestinians, that they're subhuman, they're subpar. You can see it reek out of the propaganda apparatus of Israel, with Smotrich saying, these people are filth and we should starve them. Literally, Smotrich did that. And that's what they eventually did. So, that's what we're getting here. And the right is frankly very hypocritical if you're not going to say that's an embrace of identity politics. But, the liberal establishment type is the one to demonize. But that's it.
Well, so this is where we can be friends on the same side and disagree, because, I wouldn't agree with everything you've just laid out there. I think now, last time we talked a little bit about Israel, and my take at the time was, I really don't care.
Right.
I just don't care. I honestly don't care.
I want that take bad.
Yeah.
I don't want to care. I don't want anything to do with this.
That's still my take. That's always been my take. It upsets people on both. This is one legitimately on both sides of the Israel issue. People get mad at me for that, because they say that, well, if they're very pro-Israel, they say, well, you're being a coward and you need to stand up and support Israel and talk about how Israel's our greatest, most important ally and all this stuff. But then another side, very much, it's, well, no, Israel's the great Satan. They're the most evil country in the world.
Right.
They're responsible for everything bad that happens. And which is something that I think some people legitimately really do believe at some level.
A lot of people believe that.
Right. And so then they say to me, well, you need to stand up and say, and say that. And again, my response to that is, first of all, don't tell me what to say. Okay. I have my own mind.
Amen.
So don't tell me what to say. I will say what I want to say. And I can only speak from my own opinion. This is my view. And I think, and we'll get back to it, but not to get sidetracked. This is one thing, by the way, that's making political conversation in this country impossible, is that all anyone ever does anymore is impugn the motives behind the argument that you're making. So you make an argument, and then everyone goes, well, you're only saying that because, and it's like,
yeah, they say that because you work for a guy that gives you a paycheck that is the most rigid zealot of the Zionist cause in America. That's what they say. But yeah, I guess I'm with Walsh when he says, no one can make him do anything. He has his own mind. But when he exudes a viewpoint that is straddling the fence on this issue, and people dying when it's being bankrolled by the United States, that should be refuted. That should be rejected wholesale because of how odious it is. And it just creeps into every other aspect of our foreign policy, it seems. In Venezuela, which they just mentioned, for instance, they want to insert Machado, the Nobel Prize winner, as the substitute for Maduro. Why? Because Machado is good friends with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likudniks in Israel. She's tweeted about it. She said that the cause of Israel is the cause of Venezuela, and it's well established and documented her close ties. It's Jonathan Pollard, a convicted Israeli spy, giving U.S. secrets to the Israelis at the height of the Cold War, meeting with Mike Huckabee, and then the administration coming out and saying, we stand with our ambassador in that. Just absurd. the amount of dedication to this cause is just driving a wedge between Americans, and some Americans are waking up. And Matt Walsh, you don't have to denounce your friends that are Zionists or continue to be so. You can take a stance on this without having to denounce them. And in other interviews, I've seen him conflate that. You don't necessarily have to rake Ben Shapiro over the coals. I would love to see you do that, but you can say, no, genocide is wrong no matter who does it, and I don't care who's offended by that. That's what you could say if you were a man of, actual character.
First of all, even if it's true that I'm making this argument for some dishonest reason, well, is the argument right or not? Because if the argument is right, the argument's still right, even if I'm the worst guy in the world saying
But it's also like arguing with a woman. They tell you what you think, and it's like, no, I'm actually telling you what I think.
And why? And the,
what?
Well, right. And well, here's why you're really saying that. Well, for me, the only person who can speak to your motives is you.
Exactly.
And so if I ask you, well, why are you saying that? And you tell me, I have no choice but to just accept that because I'm not in your mind. You're the only authority. You are the only authority of what is in your mind. You're the only one on the planet. The only other authority, the only greater authority is God. And I can't really ask him. So I can only go to you on that. And so
you're describing my life, but yes,
right.
I agree with you.
So for me on Israel, when I say I don't care and everyone on both sides goes, well, you're saying that because... No, I'm saying that because that's what I think. Yeah. I'm saying, and I always have, which is why, by the way, you can go through my catalog. I've been blabbering my opinions publicly for a while now, and not as I haven't been in the business as long as you, but I've been at least 10 years on the record. And if you go through that, before I worked at the Daily Wire, and while I was there, when I was independent, I was an independent blogger, just like churning out content, and and you can go through all that, and here's what you'll find that I almost never ever talked about Israel, and when I did talk about it, on the rare, like once every 5 years if it came up, my take was, I don't really care about this. I don't care about this country. It's not my country. If you're in America, if you're an American politician, you should care about America first. And that's it. That's always been my take. So that's always been my take.
By the way, me too, believe it or not, up until the last year, I don't, in 35 years, I don't think I've talked about Israel 10 times.
Well, that's the thing. Like, how can you really say that I don't care? Like, it'd be like saying the slaughter of mass people, you just don't care about that. It renders you soulless to some extent. Now, whether you should support it with financial aid, that's another question. And, to Walsh's credit, I've seen him say, I don't believe in foreign aid to any country. And someone asked him, including Israel, and he said, yeah, I didn't make any qualifiers there. But at the same time, saying you don't care when you profess to be a pro-lifer. I mean, this is something that drives a lot of, pro-choicers crazy, I would say, and pushes them into that corner. When you're going to say, life is precious, we need to preserve the life of a baby, but you just don't care about mass slaughter in Gaza because it's Israel, it's our greatest ally in the Middle East. It just exposes the hypocrisy behind that. And to be clear, I'm very pro-life. I believe in that. But I believe it's rank hypocrisy when then you say, I don't care about the mass application of the thing you say that you're against. It's, just exposing Matt Walsh to say that.
So here's the point. It's not actually about Israel. It's about the components of the American right.
Right.
Who are defending mass murder, and I mean that murder, killing people who didn't do anything wrong, in Gaza. That's it. It's not Israel. It's what about the parts of this coalition that, as you noted, Charlie really did keep together, that are now fracturing. But one of the reasons they're fracturing is because they have different views, different worldviews, and that is obvious when you hear how they respond to the murder of like kids and women in Gaza. So it's Americans responding to that. Are you really conservative? How are you not the leftist that you just described if you're like, well, they're basically all Hamas, including the kids? That is collective punishment. That's
exactly right. And that is what these prominent commentators on the right have just completely built their careers on when focusing their ire toward the liberal establishment for doing it. Tucker's exactly right. It's the application of collective punishment that used to be bad. It used to be something that we denounced, but in application from America's greatest ally against Gazans on the bankroll of the U.S., giving deference to that country over our own and over our sovereignty, we're just supposed to buy into it then. I say no. I say that's absurd.
That's blood guilt. That's the opposite of what you described. How can I be on the same side as someone with that attitude?
Well, here's what I would say. I think that if somebody is making the argument that we or Israel can kill as many Palestinians as they want, can kill children because their lives have no value because they're Palestinian. If you're making that argument, then that is a leftist argument.
Exactly. It's a leftist argument.
It is. And that's why just saying I don't care is partiality toward that, because that's the status quo. It's the mass murder of Palestinians, as many as Netanyahu and his regime wants, on the American bankroll, giving them $25 billion alone since October 7th, about $350 billion in total since the inception of Israel. So if you're saying, yeah, that's wrong, that's not a correct argument, that's a leftist argument in his mind, when most leftists would completely reject the premise. Real leftists that are dissident anti-war leftists would reject the premise that anything having to do with U.S. ties toward Israel is good. They would not accept that. But then to fence it and just say, I don't care. Well, you're really contradicting yourself there by saying that's wrong, but I don't care. Given that, again, is the status quo of what we're used to in U.S. foreign policy regime.
However, I think that there are plenty of people who would defend and have defended Israel's actions in Gaza and even our involvement, which I don't agree with us being involved at all, but people have had that view. But not on that basis. What they would say is, they would say, oh, well, it's not true that they're killing children. It's not, or it's really tragic, but it's there's no other way to fight the war. It's not intentional. It's we're actually targeting the terrorists, and these are casualties that happen like in any war. It's very bad. You try to minimize them, but we don't want that to happen. They could say, there's many arguments along those lines. It's also arguments that just kind of reject the premise. Like your premise is that they're doing mass murder of people in Gaza. I think that there are conservatives who would just reject that premise and say that's not actually happening.
Okay, but if you I think the undisputed fact there are tens of thousands, 70,000, we can certainly say tens of thousands of women and children killed in Gaza. And so there are really two arguments you can make. One is that that happens in war, collateral damage, which is true. It's 100% true that always happens in war. It hasn't happened at this scale in 80 years, but in the West, but it does happen, and the United States has done a lot of it. We dropped the atom bombs, okay, so.
Absolutely, the U.S. has no room to take the moral high ground on this because it's a mass murder machine. Our government, our criminal government, that I don't want to be complicit with at all. And the only patriotic thing is to expose that and show why regular people should be against it. And everything that comes with it, the entangling alliances, the debt, the inflation that comes with it. But Matt, I got to tell you, man, people, yes, will justify these murders and say they're all Hamas and they're not murdering those people. But Israel's own data refutes that. That leaked database that came out a few months ago, Glenn Greenwald did a story on it. The Guardian did a story about it, where a leaked database showed that 83% of the people killed in Gaza were civilians. They were not Hamas. And this is Israeli data that was created by comparing names in a database of Hamas individuals and Islamic Jihad individuals to the actual people killed. Israel's own data shows an 83% civilian casualty rate.
Israel's not the only country that's done this. But what are you sad about it? Do you think it's bad? Would you be willing to say, holy shit, I can't believe we killed 70,000 non-combatants? That's the acid test. Can you admit that that's horrible? It's horrible. It's a moral crime. It was a moral crime when we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. And it's not even a close call in my view. It's not an endorsement of the Imperial Japanese government, but it's that's just bad. If you can't say that, then you are endorsing collective punishment, aren't you?
Yeah, I would say you are entirely. You're getting away from the cornerstone of Western civilization as Tucker Carlson sees it anyways, and I happen to agree. The idea of individual identity, of individual rights, of self-ownership, where we obtain our rights from our creator. And if you're not religious, you just believe that it's an extension of your own humanity, but that is the cornerstone of the West. This idea that there are some inviolable aspects of humanity that just can't be circumscribed or limited or inhibited by a central state. And when you're denying that agency to others by excusing mass murder and just saying, I don't care, and that being your position, you know, I'm not really that surprised that you get attacked from both sides on that, because this is a pressing issue. The Israel first mentality is completely pervasive in our government, from the presidential administration to Congress to the bureaucracy. It seeps into our culture. You can see how it seeps into the Epstein scandal and, you know, the Charlie Kirk assassination. All this plays into a pivotal time in history where I don't think you can really sit this one out, Matt Walsh. I don't think you can sit out, you know, what your opinion is toward Israel. I think you either have to come down on one side or the other. You're not forced to. You can continue straddling the fence. Your free speech demands that you can continue doing that, but it only invites the suggestions that you're not ready for this moment, that you're not as courageous as many, you know, right-wingers want to believe that you are, and that you built your career, you know, doing. So that's what you're getting here. This is a Daily Wire employee that works under the thumb of Shapiro. So to what extent this represents his true beliefs or not, I guess that's anyone's question. There has been rifts between the Daily Wire and Brett Cooper, the Daily Wire and Candace Owens, for obvious reasons. Maybe Matt could be the next. I just wonder if that happens, if Matt will reveal a stronger opinion on this side. But, you know, he makes lucrative ventures happen with Ben Shapiro and his company maintaining this fence-sitting line that, you know, it has to discourage Ben Shapiro, for instance, to even have him on this show. By the way, talking to Tucker Carlson, when I interviewed Dave Smith the other night, he talked about the fact that, you know, at one point Ben Shapiro went on Megyn Kelly and was trying to just destroy people who dared to talk to Tucker Carlson. He wanted this cancellation crusade to be transferred through conversations, and that for it to be an inception where if you talk to Tucker, then you're wrong. And if you talk to the guy that talked to Tucker, then you're wrong. Well, your biggest guy, Ben Shapiro, is talking to Tucker. Are you going to come out and smear him as an anti-Semite now? Are you going to say that he's wrong-headed for having that conversation with Tucker? I don't think that's going to happen. I think that he could make some exceptions for the guy that's making all the money for the Daily Wire, but that's what we see here. But what do you guys think? Is Tucker Carlson right? Is Matt Walsh just not ready for this moment? A coward of sorts morally for refusing to actually take a position against mass murder and saying Israel is guilty of that in this situation? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Tucker Carlson. Great segment. I'm glad this subject came up. I really appreciate it. And if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. And if you do that, you can gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below, and that'll send you off to a website. You just plug in your email address, and I'll send that to you free of charge just because you watch my content. And I appreciate you. Until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.
But what is Israel's plan? You know, I understand the short-term goals that are often articulated, but what does this look like in 10 years? It is widely believed in Washington that Israel will initiate another war against Iran in this coming year, 2026. It seems like the prospect of, you know, full rights internally or a separate and autonomous Palestinian state more remote than ever. That seems less likely than ever to happen.
What's the dark truth about Israel's endgame in Gaza? What are the chances of a new Israeli-US war in Iran? And what does this mean for Qatar? Tucker Carlson gets to the bottom of these questions with the Qatari Prime Minister here recently, talking about what this means for Middle Eastern politics, the Trump administration, and US foreign policy in general. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
What happens to the current residents of Gaza? Do they stay in Gaza? I know there's an effort to find some other country to send them to, either in Asia or Sudan or Milwaukee. But do they stay in Gaza?
Well, I think that, when it's hurting us when we hear people talking about the people of Gaza as some sort of different people, because they have the right to have the choice where to live. And they don't want to, to leave their country. And we have seen these demonstrations in many occasions when we see the opening between the south and the north of Gaza. We see the mass return of the people to their homes, even if their homes is flattened and gone. They just go there and build a tent. And this is just showing you how solid are those people, how resilient are those people, how those people, they don't want to leave the land that they belong to. And I don't see anyone has the right to deport them or to force them to go somewhere else. It's their country, it's their home, and they have all the right to stay there and to live there.
Amen. If there's a different people in the Middle East, it's the Israelis that came in due to a mass land redistribution scheme by the globalists at the UN, mostly supported by the United States and Britain in 1947 and 1948, just carving out vast swaths of territory owned by Palestinians to redistribute them to Jewish settlers there, kicking off a series of conflicts and a morass, a money sink, a money pit, a genocidal engine of war, and the worst entangling alliance that my country gets embroiled in. So, yeah, the Palestinians have a right to live where their fathers lived, certainly so, and it's only war, conquest, and a rigid series of conflicts that started because of this creation of a Palestinian state. So many people say that, this has been going on for thousands of years. They've been fighting each other for thousands of years, when no, there was something like 750 or 80 or 800 years of relative peace between the peoples in the Levant, after the end of the last crusade and until 1947. I wonder what that year coincided with.
Yeah, the idea of moving millions of people by force into another country, has been discredited, I would say, historically. Big picture, this is a question that remains unanswered in the United States. What is the plan here exactly in the Levant? What is Israel's plan? What is the strategy? I understand it's, defeating Hamas and Hezbollah. And, I understand the short-term goals that are often articulated, but what does this look like in 10 years? What is the object? Do you have any idea?
Well, I think if we look at the situation currently, I have mentioned that yesterday. The situation currently is not is not something that can survive for long in being stable. Now, the issue that if the Israeli forces remains there, if the violations remains happening in Gaza, this conflict can escalate again. And that's what all of us, we want to avoid. The best plan is to apply what's been already agreed on in the plan that President Trump has launched and the countries in the region has supported, to rebuild Gaza for the Gazans people to remain there, but also finding a political solution for the bigger issue, because if you keep this issue unresolved, the Palestinian issue unresolved, things will escalate again and again. We cannot build a house without building the foundation of that house. And the foundation of that house, that the Palestinian people get their rights for their states and they have the right to stay in their own land.
Yeah, absolutely right in that last part, but the best case scenario isn't to follow the Trump ceasefire, which doesn't build that foundation he talks about. It doesn't promise a Palestinian state. And in contrast to that, Netanyahu goes to the UN with his own delegation sitting there cheering, with all the other delegations leaving. Why? Because he's a genocidal freak. And Netanyahu here at the podium saying there will never be a Palestinian state. And I hate to say, when you have veto power from the U.S. and the UN Security Council, that does seem to be the case. It doesn't matter how much geopolitical support there is, international consensus on this, it won't be the case if the United States continues to bankroll Israel. Now, I hope that doesn't happen, but it's not like this ceasefire gets to the root of the problem. So yeah, I'm glad there's a ceasefire in contrast to, say, an all-out starvation crusade and an open genocide, but I think that there's a big chance that that's renewed. Why? Because the ceasefire falls short of giving them a Palestinian state. So I say lean on the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which Qatar is a signing party of, which would normalize relationships with Israel, but also guarantee a Palestinian state. That is what you should say. And if you're the Qatari prime minister, you're in a rock and a hard place. The United States is your ally, and you have to tread a fine line, I guess, between critiquing the superpower that I guess quasi has your back, and I don't even think that's true because, there's this big delusion that Trump, sided with Qatar when Israel bombed it, but he didn't respond in any policy methods to counteract that by, threatening to withhold some Israeli aid. Imagine that. Will never happen. But at the same time, I think I'd be a little bit more critical if I was a Qatari prime minister and head of state trying to represent my people that have been dealt a blow by just allowing the U.S. to just be like, okay, I guess Israel did bomb you, but Netanyahu will apologize. All things are over. He just knocked that apology out of the park, guys. Don't worry.
From an outside perspective, it seems like the prospect of, full rights internally or a separate and autonomous Palestinian state, those seem like more remote than ever. That seems less likely than ever to happen, but maybe I'm reading it wrong.
Well, unfortunately, peace needs, a partner also for that. With the current configuration in Israel and what we are seeing in the political landscape there in the Knesset and all those resolutions that they are passing against the two-state solution is just, setting us apart from this path, which is unfortunate to see that there is no enforcement to push them that this is the only path forward to have a two-state solution.
He's exactly right about that, for the record. The United States does not push them in any direction toward that. In fact, the Trump administration, you had Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance saying, hey, we don't like these resolutions that are calling for an Israeli-occupied West Bank. It's already 60% occupied by the Israelis, by the way. But we don't want them to pass these resolutions. But then there's never any political repercussions. There's never any aid tied to this, and whether or not they guarantee to give that land back, to allow a Palestinian state and not to continue to occupy that territory with Israeli settlements since 1967. And ironically, you have, I think, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, I think both live in illegal Israeli settlements on the West Bank. You never have the United States push back against that. Instead, you say, oh, we don't agree with that, but then never do anything. So I'm with him on that part.
We cannot, remain hostage to the far right and the extremist agenda to, ethnically cleanse the Palestinian or to kick them out of their lands. And what we are looking for two countries, two people living side by side peacefully and being part of the region. And that's what the entire region is aspiring for.
It is widely believed in Washington that Israel will initiate another war against Iran in this coming year, 2026. I don't know if that's true. Do you believe it is true?
Well, let's hope not. I think that it's very important to try to find a way to reactivate the talks on the nuclears and to see a track of diplomacy, because right now what we are seeing, there's an absence of any efforts in resolving the issue diplomatically. And as we have mentioned many times, that anything would happen to Iran, it will have its impact on the entire region, on the entire Gulf region. Qatar, Saudi, Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, all the countries will be affected with such a thing. And I hope not, but there is a lot of uncertainty of what's happening in the region right now. We see Lebanon bombing is continuing while what supposedly the war is ended. We see Gaza bombing is still continuing while there is a ceasefire is ongoing. So it all depends on how can we make sure that Israel stops at this level and doesn't escalate further.
Well, you can't stop it with the U.S. bankrolling it and not doing anything to stop it. I mean, Trump theoretically has that power. He could get Israel to stop bombing 8 of your neighbors or 7 of your neighbors since October 7th. Otherwise, we don't keep giving you aid. People in Congress saying, stop bombing your neighbors. Otherwise, we don't vote for aid. The bureaucracy saying, hey, don't do this or we won't, or we'll withhold your aid, but it won't happen because of how much this government is captured by Zionists and neocons that are friendly to the Zionist experiment. And I mean neocons, the people that have foreign policy indistinguishable from Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz and Podhoretz and all the monsters that have soaked this country in blood in foreign regime change operations and military escapades for decades. That is the truth. And when it comes to Iran, good luck if you want nuclear discussions to unfold again. They've already been duped by the United States in collaboration with Israel, with Trump essentially boasting about it at one point that he used the ruse of negotiations to lure them into a false sense of security, then launching the war with Israel, first backing it, and then saying, oh no, Israel's doing this on its own, then saying, no, I guess we are helping them and supporting them, then we are bombing them, I guess, and then truth socialing that, hey, if Iran won't make itself great again, why not there be a regime change? And I don't think we've heard the end of the clamor and propaganda that we've been hearing about Iran being seconds, minutes, negative seconds away from acquiring a nuke. It's been going on my entire lifetime. It's going to continue to go on, and the neocons and Zionists will always do that until that regime is overthrown. Trump made it a point under his first administration to rip up the JCPOA in collaboration with the Israeli government. So when everyone was talking about Russian influence in government, it was actually Trump acting on behalf of Israel to shred the JCPOA and open up a new avenue for bombing Iran. That's the truth.
One of the reasons I openly admire you despite much criticism and was grateful to interview you today is because your country acts as a kind of neutral zone around the world, not just in your region. Switzerland no longer being non-aligned, unfortunately, it's fallen to your country to be the place where people can negotiate conflicts to peace, settlement. You're doing that in Eastern Europe with Russia, Ukraine. You helped get Evan Gershkovich out of prison in Russia. I don't know if you've gotten credit for that. God bless you for doing that. Do you see that conflict as moving toward resolution?
Well, I think that there are a lot of hope in the current endeavor that's carried out by the United States to reach to a resolution, because I believe that, this war has becoming like very disruptive, not only for Europe and not only for the Ukrainians, becoming disruptive for the entire world, and it's just, polarizing the world more and more. And this is not in anyone's interest, and it will have its consequences. Right now, we see relentless efforts by the U.S. administration in order to achieve a deal, and the Ukrainians are engaging in this process, and we are trying our best also whenever we are needed to help and to support within that process. But I believe it is solvable. It can be achieved. It's not something impossible.
Interesting. I hate to disagree and say there are people that are supporting that war. There are a beneficiary, or I should say beneficiaries in the plurality. It's the military-industrial complex in the United States. It's Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Northrop Grumman that are profiting from this proxy war with Russia. It's a prolonged scheme to extract money from the American populace, give it to the bomb makers, military contractors, and a warped and perverted militaristic martial law regime in Ukraine that, by the way, was kicked off by the overthrow of the Yanukovych government by the United States in 2014. That's what you got. Now you have Zelensky trying to make the conscription age more than 60, I believe. I think it's 60 right now. It's either 55 or 60 to get these old men to be conscripts in this military where so much of the Donbass is occupied. It seems like a lost cause at this point, where Russia holds something like 85% of the Donbass and 20% of Ukraine in general. They're not going to get it back. They're not going to get Crimea back. And I hate to say, Trump isn't exactly working to stop that conflict, because he could seriously end it tomorrow. He could say, Zelensky, here's your peace deal. Take it or leave it. If you take it, we'll help you assure peace. We're getting out of here. If you don't take it, it's up to you. We're out of here. No more arms, no more intelligence, no more weaponry, no more resources, no more fairy tales of Ukraine getting in NATO. We're out. Lean on the Europeans if you want, but you're out. That's what Trump could do, but he won't do that because it's too lucrative for the military-industrial complex, the bankers, and the lobbies that he, too, is connected to.
So last question. I've been personally, not to make it about me, but I have been criticized as being a tool of Qatar. And I just want to say what you already know, which is I've never taken anything from your country and don't plan to. I am, however, tomorrow buying a place in Qatar, both because I am
pay a high check
in Doha, yeah, and I'm doing that because I like the city. I think it's beautiful, but also to make the statement that I'm an American and a free man, and I'll be wherever I want to be, which I think is important. But that does kind of leave us in a place where I have not taken any money from Qatar. I have instead given money to Qatar. And I wonder if you feel that that means I've bought you and you will now spew my propaganda.
Well, thank you. Just ask me whatever you want me to do for you, I will do it. But
that's good stuff, but that is truthful. You know, there's this delusion among the right and segments of the right and the Zionists that say, hey, if you criticize Israel one iota, it means you're a Qatari agent. And they say this about 50% of the American populace that have totally turned their backs on the Israel first propaganda and Israel first mentality. It's like, yeah, if 50% of Americans were guilty of this, I don't know that the Qatari treasury could handle all those payouts and direct deposits from all those agents. It's like, no, they use that same propaganda against anyone that dares defy the war machine, the Moore regime, and the Israel first attitude in Washington. They said this: if you're against the Iraq war, Iraq invasion, you must be pro-Saddam. If you're against the war in Vietnam, you must be pro-communist or you're a Ho Chi Minh supporter. If you dared to defy the idea of bringing Russia to brinksmanship in a potential nuclear war, well, you're a Putin agent, you're a KGB stooge, you're part of the Kremlin's Vatnik apparatus. That's what they said. They'll always say that. And really what it is, it's just projection, knowing how much control Israel exercises over our government.
Look, Tucker, unfortunately, as I told you, that there are a lot of players putting a lot of efforts to sabotage the relationship between Qatar and the United States and to try to demonize anyone who will come to this country. Our efforts, when we are lobbying or doing, our outreach in the United States, is to make sure that this relationship is safeguarded. And the relationship for us is mutually beneficial. We are not getting aid from United States. We are buying from United States. We are partnering with them. We are investing in the United States investing in Qatar. And this relationship has been always a two-way relationship. And we pay all these amounts for lobbying only to protect and to safeguard this relationship. If we were not being attacked and under a lot of disinformation campaign that's been unfortunately funded by other players who doesn't want to see a U.S.-Qatar relationship flourish, we would spend this money for better things, to do with the relationship.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of ironic because a lot of the Zionists saying that you're paid off by Qatar if you criticize Israel. It's like, why do you think that Qatar contains the biggest U.S. airbase in the region? It's because that it's being used to protect Israel if it's attacked by any of its Arab neighbors. That's why. It's not to do anything but to support Israel. So I always tell those people, hey, I'm anti any entangling alliance. I'm anti any government. I don't even like my government. I want to cut all ties to Qatar. And, you know, in the hierarchy of dangerous and entangling alliances that the U.S. gets into, it's not even close to being as dangerous as Israel, because Israel's bankrolling a genocide, getting us into regime change operations with complicit players in the U.S., of course. But it's always at behest of Israel. But at the same time, I don't want any ties to Qatar either. I don't want any Middle Eastern entangling alliances. Get our bases out of there, get our resources out of there, bring every last U.S. troop home, and stop the empire building schemes there. They're never fruitful. They're never worth it. And guess what? I don't want any of those joint exercises between the U.S. military and Qatar in Idaho either. That story came out a few months ago. I don't want any of that. I don't want any foreign aid to any countries, Qatar included, but it's definitely not as dangerous as the entangling alliance that the U.S. has right now with Israel, by far. Israel is occupying our political system, robbing us of our sovereignty, and getting us embroiled in these conflicts. And again, there's complicit U.S. actors too. Lots of blame to go around. It's not just Israelis. It's not just Jews in Israel. It's neocons and Christian Zionists in the United States too that are pulled into all these absurdities. It's atheist Zionists. It's Buddhist Zionists to the extent that they are around. It's everyone that is complicit with this foreign policy catastrophe that the United States has chosen in the Middle East. So yeah, at some point we need to come to terms with that the ties to Israel are not beneficial to us and should be cut completely, just as all entangling alliances are. Now let's hope that happens. Let's hope that there is a peace established at some point in Israel and that there's not a renewed war in Iran. But what we've learned is that there's always opportunities for more war in the second Trump administration, now with it potentially looming over Caracas and Venezuela in a regime change operation that's probably playing out sometime soon, and it really is already in motion. So that's where we're sitting here. Hopefully no new war in Iran. Netanyahu's already propagandizing it on Ben Shapiro's show and others. He's saying that a mushroom cloud might consume Boston or New York City if the United States doesn't put boots on the ground and overthrow them. He didn't literally say that, but that's what Israel's endgame is. They don't want IDF boots on the ground. They want American boots on the ground. And I sure as hell am not dying for Israel. I'll tell you that. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Will there be a new war in Iran? What is the endgame for Gaza? What will it look like in 10 years? Will there be any movement toward a Palestinian state at all? Will the Israel lobby's influence die in the United States in 10 years, or at least wane significantly? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Tucker Carlson. Really appreciate this interview. Good talk, interesting subjects at the very least, and mixed opinions on them, but I shared them to the extent I could. Also, if you like this video or my take, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. And if you do that, you'll gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. So you'll be able to view all those members-only videos immediately. And I really appreciate that if you support me in that way. Also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you off to a website. You just plug in your email in the box there, and I will ship you a free PDF of that book. No obligation, totally free, just because I appreciate you. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.